Okay, great.
So thanks for everyone joining us this morning. We have two guests with us today to talk about a topic, which is how you can weave in story design into your microlearning. Our two guests are firstly Rance Green, who's the founder of Need a Story and president of ATD Dallas. Hey Rance, how are you?
Hi, everybody. Good to see you.
And we've got a familiar face and voice in Sam Fari, who is one of our lead learning designers in New York City. Hey, Sam.
Hey, good to see everybody.
So before we dive into to Rance, your kind of unpacking of story design and its benefits, if you wanted to share a little bit about yourself and your new book release, I know that we've certainly gotten some value out of it. If you could share a little bit about what you're doing.
Sure. Thank you, Luke. Good morning. My name is Rance, and I am, as Sam mentioned, I'm in Texas, Dallas, Texas. I have a background in theater and in the arts, and so when I came into the talent development field, I brought all of that background with me and began designing stories as part of the training. And I thought it was kind of normal because I was very new to the industry when I first started, of course. And I began sharing my work with others and found out that it was actually kind of a struggle for a lot of instructional designers to get their heads and their hands around storytelling for training and how to make it truly meaningful and impactful for their audiences. So I began to, how I did things with other people, and that kind of developed into workshops. And then last year I spent the whole year writing instructional story design, which is the book that was released last month by ATD Press. And as Luke mentioned, I am the president of the ATD Dallas chapter. We are the largest chapter in the United States and have a great community, a very lively community of talent development professionals. And a lot of those people are instructional designers. So I'm in good company and I really enjoy leading this organization. It's been very rewarding. So it's great to be with you today, and I hope that you get what you are coming for today and are able to really, capitalize on the power of storytelling for your training.
Brilliant. Thank you for that intro there, Brent. So we'll move into the agenda. So if you wanted to take over the screen, I'll let you drive, and we can walk through the content that you've prepared.
Awesome. So Rance prepared a lesson in EdApp that uses these principles. And just while he's getting his iPad set up to share, I just want to say I've been reading the book. I suggest anyone who's interested in story design, instructional design to read it. It's one of the best reads of instructional design I've ever read. And the reason is because he practices what he preaches with story. It's written like short stories. There's dialogue, there's action, there's characters. Carl says the book rocks. Carl's, okay, awesome. Yeah, it really does. So yeah, huge recommendation coming from me. Well, not huge, but I'm recommending it hugely. Is that a word? Okay, great.
Thank you, Sam.
No problem.
And thank you, Carl. I'm so glad that you're reading it and that you're enjoying it. I do have a question for everybody, and I want to learn a little bit about how you are using stories in your training currently and why. So if you wouldn't mind just typing in the chat how you are using stories in training now and why. And if you're not using stories now, how could you imagine using stories for training and why? Let's go ahead and type your answers in the chat. So Carl says we use a 4-screen case study. So like
So
you show the events that are kind of playing out using 4 screens. Is that what that's called? Is that what that means? Oh, well,
here we
hello.
are.
Here's a
Yeah,
full explanation.
so this is from the COVID course that's in our content library, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
Yeah, and these are the screens here. So
Okay, so
slides.
setting the context. Dakota, a genetic counselor at Valley Regional Medical Center, had just started. It was his first day. A challenge. The first patient had a newborn child with genetic mutation that's always fatal. Wow, this is awesome.
This is from the HIPAA course. The HIPAA course, if people want to check it out.
Okay, awesome. HIPAA training. Yeah, this is pretty intense for HIPAA. The tension element.
Oh, Carl.
The parent who had struggled to have children or waiting consultation room. The question: how can Dakota's strengths help deal with this situation? Wow, that's great, Carl. And so, was this an actual case study, or is this a fictional story? I'll let you. Oh, this is an example and not in any course. Okay, all right. You came up with that really quick. That's awesome. A fictional story. Okay, cool. So we mentioned case studies. So case studies, in my mind, are nonfiction. They are things that are actually happening, and those are great uses of story. And then Carl, you just provided a fictional story, so that's really great. Carla says, I'm not using it now, but why? To help people understand the experience of applying learning. Yep, that's good. And so experience implies maybe more than just head knowledge, but you're actually getting them emotionally involved as well. That's great. Xuan, telling the stories of community empowerment for social entrepreneurship course. Telling the stories of community empowerment. Community empowerment for social entrepreneurship course. Okay, cool. So maybe snagging stories that are out there in the community to show the power of social entrepreneurship and to show the effects of entrepreneurship on the community. That's a great use of story too. Any other reasons why you would use stories for training? These are great examples. Sangeeta says, the why. Stories increase knowledge retention. That's a great point, Sangeeta. And a lot of times in courses, people do want to know what's in it for me. And sometimes just saying that outright, is not as effective as actually watching a story unfold and seeing for yourself why it's so important that this training is so important. And I would say, yes, stories absolutely increase knowledge retention and enjoyment. So yeah, increasing retention and yeah, making it enjoyable, making it fun, making it some sort of emotional connection, right? Awesome. So these are great reasons. I think that the reasons why stories are so great for training falls into 3 basic categories. One is that they are memorable. You remember stories for a long time. And so if you want your audience to use, to remember your training for a long time, tell stories. Marlena says, we use it for modeling. If we're teaching a new business course about the importance of separating the finances of the family from the business, we will tell the story about the before-after life of Patricia, who learned how to make that difference and how it changed her. We like to give the story in chunks, stopping at cliffhangers to teach brief bits of content. That's fantastic. The cliffhangers part, we'll talk about that in just a minute, Marlena, but That's a great use. That's a great use of story.
Right, especially in
Okay.
micro learning, and in the book actually, I remember there was a part about lessons being almost like episodes of a television series, and I think that kind of aligns with what Marlene is saying. Thank you, Marlene.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's a case, I have 5 case studies of companies who have implemented that, and that was Pizza Hut had a leadership program in which they were showing, they kind of had like a Netflix type of dashboard for their learning, and it was this series of episodes, similar to what Marlene is describing. So yeah, that's a good point, Sam. And
Awesome.
then Shuan says, stories help students to have a real world reference for the theories that they learn. Oh, thank you. Yes, 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 yes. And that totally speaks to the second piece of why stories are so powerful, is that they are actionable. When you're watching a story or reading it or listening to a story, um, your body, your mind is being prepared to take action on that. Um, and it's not just theory, as Schumann pointed. It's actually unfolding. You're observing actions take place, and it's preparing you to take action on what the training is teaching. So great point, Shuan. So if you want to prepare your learners for action, like a flight simulator, that's why the plane's on there. It's like a flight simulator. Stories act as that way. That the things that are happening in that simulation are preparing you for real life. And then lastly, stories are emotional. And so it provides this natural connection between between the training and the audience and the learners. So, and emotion also has a big impact on why something is so memorable and why something is actionable. So emotions, I think, are a bit of a turnoff in a lot of corporations. They don't want emotion. They don't want to be perceived as emotional. They want to be perceived as professional. And the emotion kind of gets lost, right? I mean, how many corporate communication memos are emotional? They just tell you the facts, right? And how many courses have you taken where it's absolutely emotionless? And studies have shown, continue to show, that we can't even make decisions without some emotional component. And we certainly can't take action on new knowledge, new skills, and new attitudes without emotion being involved in some way. Okay. Let me describe to you the story design model. And the book, of course, dives very deeply into this, but I just want to give you the basics here. And then I'm going to show you, as Sam said, I'm going to show you an example in EdApp of a very simple story-based course. So what we want to do is we have this gap between story and action. And the action refers to learning, right? But it also refers to the action that learners need to take as a result of learning. So we want to motivate that learning. We want to enable that learning and turn it into action. But there's a gap. We need to fill it. Okay, so any questions so far? Sam, do you have any questions for me from that first section before we go through the model?
No, I think later I would like to expand on how important is it and how important it is to acknowledge emotion, especially from just employees from a management perspective. How important is it to acknowledge experience of workers and employees in our lessons? So, but I'll save that for the afterwards. Does anyone
Okay.
else have any questions before we go forward? Okay, I would say let's go.
Okay. All right. All right. We've already some really great insights from this group. So go ahead and type in the chat what you think are the elements of a story. What makes up a story? What are the bare elements that you need? Go ahead and type your answer in the chat.
What are the elements of story? Beginning, middle,
Okay,
and end.
yeah.
This is Chris. Characters.
Characters. Nice.
Start, change, and end. It's the same Gita. Characters, setting, problem, plot, solution. Plot? Oh, there's so many. I recognize a few people from our workshop. Setting the scene, personification of the characters, exposition, conflict, and resolution. Context, characters, events, actions.
Awesome. You guys are great. So Marlena, yeah, and Jeanette, that's true. Challenge. Marlena, you kind of hit on conflict, and we're going to talk about that. And several of you, Vivian and others of you, hit upon characters. And those are the two that we're going to focus on right now. These are the two essentials for storytelling for training that if they're absent, you don't really have a story, and certainly not a story that's going to be effective for training. So let's look at those two elements, and we're going to add a little bit to them. It's not just characters, but I call it relatable characters for a good reason. Because if you are writing a course for, for people in a call center who are answering phones, and your characters are, executives in a startup company, obviously there's going to be a disconnect there. And that's kind of an extreme example, but you want to make sure that the characters are characters that your audience will relate to, which means what? You have to know your audience. So how do you get to know your audience, your learners? You create an audience profile, and I do this for every new project that I work on. I find out as much as I can about who the people are that are going to be taking this course. And, I even asked some questions of Sam and Luke to find out who's going to be on this webinar today, so I can make sure that I'm speaking their language. And so, speaking your language. I hope I'm speaking your language today. So create an audience profile, and the audience profile can contain questions that will reveal what the work circumstances are and how your audience is reacting to those work circumstances. You can find out what their fears are, even what they do in their spare time, and what they value. These are the kinds of questions that you want to ask to fill out this audience profile. And as you have this audience profile, then you'll be able to begin to craft characters that fit that profile, so that your characters are going to be relatable to your audience. And then you want to put these relatable characters into strong conflict. And I was asked last night, does it have to be strong conflict? And my answer to that is yes. As strong as possible. And there's a reason why I use that, because I think that we do kind of, for training, we delight in showing people the right way to do things. And it's maybe a little bit difficult to insert conflict into it. And so I use the word strong to just emphasize conflict is necessary. For a story to actually have the effect that you want it to have for training. But how do you come up with conflict? As an instructional designer, you're very good at analysis, and you're very good at interviewing stakeholders and subject matter experts to make sure that you are getting the actions that learners need to take right. And so, I call this an action list. You may call it a task list or learning objectives or performance objectives, but it is a logically ordered list of actions that learners should take as a result of training. And this is necessary for instruction. This is a non-negotiable. You must have this to even create a course. So I know that you're doing this now.
And I know a lot of people, Rance, they will start with objectives and they'll work backwards from those. So if they're interviewing with stakeholders, they say, what do you want them to walk away with? And that is how we're going to construct the rest of the lesson. So I know that it's yeah. So that you're giving a name to this thing here, the action list.
Yep, an action list, and really the interview process is kind of an art and something that you really have to practice over a time. And that's why in the book I actually have like actual conversations that you would have with a stakeholder or with a subject matter expert to make sure that you're getting the business outcome identified, the root problem is identified, and you're determining even if training is going to be the right solution for this in those initial conversations. And then from there, you're really asking these questions that will reveal who your audience is, because a lot of times the subject matter expert knows the audience pretty well. And they can help you answer those questions, and they can also help you structure this action list. Another reason why I call it the action list is because it keeps it top of mind for the subject matter expert, that we're not, just know the policy is not enough. Be aware of, is not enough. There has to be an action as a result of being aware of something. There has to be an action as a result of knowing what the policy is. What does the policy actually say? Yeah. Corporate policies usually say don't, and don't do these things. But there has to be, those are not actions, those are non-actions. We have to find a way to make that action. I need to do something as a result of this policy. So especially if you're designing compliance training, you're going to hit this a lot, where you're just kind of given these maybe more general, be aware of type of objectives. We just want people to be aware. Like, this is awareness training. Awareness is not bad, but awareness is more communications. It's less training. So you want to make sure that your subject matter expert knows that we're creating an action list here. So I've talked enough about that. Putting relatable characters into strong conflict with that action list is what's going to produce a tailor-made story for that course. And there's something wonderful that happens inside the learner when you put relatable characters into strong conflict. It produces a desire for resolution. They want to see a resolution happen. I mean, it's just part of us, right? We tell stories all the time and we want to know the end. We want to know what happens. We don't want that conflict to linger, but you're gonna let it linger. You're gonna let it stay there. Just like, who was it that had the cliffhangers? Marlena. Just with the cliffhangers, you want to have that desire for resolution to linger and not give it away. Because the next part of the model, which completes that connection between the story and action, is training. And so we're going to let the training do the work. We're going to let the story do the work of critical thinking on the part of the learner. And then we're just going to easily just bring that training right in. So do you want to see it in action?
Yeah.
Okay. I will start up my iPad here. And I put my my contact information there if you want to get in touch with me. So I'm going to now share this course with you. Just give me a moment. Okay. So before I show you this, do you have any questions about the story design model or anything that we've discussed so far? Are you with me? Do you get it? Understand the power behind story design?
In terms of the, so far so good, that's great. In terms of the relatable character, Rance, how important is your, well, these are stories that we're talking about are from third, what do you call it? Third person perspective. How important is that looking at another character that is like the position that the worker employee is in, as opposed to saying the second person perspective where it goes, you walk in and says, and this happens to you, what do you do? So what is the difference there, if there is one, and does it matter in terms of reflection for the learner?
Right. That's a great question. And it doesn't matter whether, and I've done both, where you're kind of putting the learner in the story. That's really great for gamification, and that's great for augmented reality and virtual reality, to put the learner in the position of, this is your story. But it doesn't matter.
Okay.
When we watch a story unfold with other characters involved, the same brain activities happening as if you were in the story. It's like you take that story on as your own almost. And that's why you can get so emotionally involved when you're watching a movie or reading a book, because just because you're watching other people go through it doesn't mean that you're not making that connection. You are. So that's a great
Awesome.
question.
Yeah, because we do have a template that's basically puts you there. It's in the multiple choice section of our template library, and it's the chat. So when there's someone who speaks, and you decide what you say in response to it. So
yeah, I think I have that template in this course. So
awesome, great.
yeah. So this is the story design course. And the first lesson is the one I'm going to show you, and it's the example lesson of a story design course. So this course is designed for managers, and the managers are there to learn about how to handle an employee concern. So an employee comes into their office. How do you handle that concern? What are the steps that you take? This speaks to the very first interaction that you have with the employee when they come into the office, to your office. So you're going to put yourself in the role of a manager right now, and taking this course as if you are the manager. Okay. So here we go. Do you see the lesson here, Sam?
Yep.
Okay. Let's begin. All right, this is the opening slide of the lesson. Stella tells her staff, I have an open door. Today, Justin takes her up on that offer. Here's how it goes. Cute, right?
Sound effect.
Thank you for the sound effects there. So it's a little bit small, so I will read it. Hi, Stella. I know you're busy, but if you have a minute, could we talk? Sure, Justin, come on in. What's up? Thanks. Well, I just wanted to let you know something about work, Sure. What's on your mind? All right. What do you think Justin is thinking?
Let's ask the audience. What do you think Justin is thinking?
At this point in the story.
Option 2, huh? I thought it was option. I disagree, Marlita. Option 1. The Sagita says option 1. Okay. Now I said option 1 because.
Don't tell them why. Don't tell them why.
We'll tell them why.
Don't tell them why you thought that yet.
Okay,
Okay,
good.
so we'll go with option one. Does she even know I'm here? Yep. Think about how you would feel if you were Justin. Okay, so we're going to reflect on this story a little bit. We've just seen. Oh yeah, I'm clicking on the screen instead of tapping on my iPad. Okay, so why do you think Justin feels this way? Maybe Sangeeta, you can give us some insight. Why do you think that Justin is feeling that way? Or anybody?
Okay, here we go. Option one, because she sounds like she's using empty words. And Sangeeta says, not much change in manager's body language.
You know, I don't know how to pronounce your name. I'm so sorry. Kogile? Is that right? I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, but it's interesting that you say because she sounds like she is using empty words, right? And it's interesting your word choice because in your head you could hear her, right? We didn't hear any sound here, but in your head you could hear her, and that's the wonderful thing. But thanks, thanks for showing a little bit of grace there. But yeah, in your head you're imagining the story happening, even though you don't hear her voice. You're imagining it happen. So, and then Sangeeta says not much change in body language. So, you know, we'll just put her body language. Okay, and this is a cool feature, a cool template that you can use to like get people to start thinking through things and why we're reflecting on the story now, right? We're putting it in our own words, why we think something is the way it is. This is a survey template, right?
This is a survey template. Yeah, but you can use it for anything. I think it's a creative use of survey templates is a good idea. I mean, does not have to just come at the end of a lesson and be about the lesson. It can be about how you, something like this, where it's an open-ended question.
Yeah, yeah. So use those. Don't restrict yourself to the templates. You know, like push them to the limit. And so this is a survey template, and you want, just think about what you want people to do. You know, you want them to reflect on the story. You want them to like start offering their own insights, start critically thinking about the story itself.
And if I could just add something, Rance, we actually have a feature, and I'm not sure if I showed it to you or not, but we have a discussion board feature where we give learners prompts. Say, tell us a story when you had a difficult customer and what you did about it. And so people can actually have discussions with each other and tell their own stories to each other, which is invaluable, especially when you have more experienced employees and new employees and just passing on knowledge.
Oh, nice.
So
So you can
I'll
see
show you that.
you can see the answers of other people.
Yes, you can see the answers
Wow,
and
that's
reply
cool.
to them. Yeah.
Okay, I will be using that feature. I will be.
Yeah. Awesome.
Okay, so Sam appropriately pointed out that my verbiage here is a little bit off. The word ability should really be more like performance. So how would you rate Stella's performance to give Justin her full attention? Is she giving him great attention or is she giving attention? Oops. So I'll let you guys put your answers in there. Okay, so we have a 4 and we have a 2. We have a 2.5. Well, she is speaking, right? She is speaking to him. We'll put it in the middle and see where it goes. There we go. It went to the 2. Okay. Okay, so here is a picture of present tense, right? This is what is actually happening. So, oh, and more like condescending attention. Oh my goodness, what a scathing review. How can Stella give Justin her full attention? So now this is where the training is coming in, right? This is how Stella is treating Justin now in this picture. But what could she do? She could stop working. She could give him eye contact. And she could, as was suggested before, open her body to him. And so this cool little guy, that's better. Now think about how you handle those first moments when an employee comes to you with a concern. Okay, so now we've shown a before and how things could be if she was giving Justin her full attention. Making sense? Okay, so now we have a lead into this next part of the training. Go ahead, Sam.
Can you actually go back and forth on that template just so I could see the before and after again? It's a really great use of our comparison template. Picture before, and then the slide is fantastic. It is a very good use of that. So thank you for that. Awesome.
Sure. And what are we showing here? We're showing a non-example and an example, right?
Exactly.
So our story really embodies the non-example, and that's important. And then we're showing the example, which is the training itself.
Awesome.
Thank you, Marlena. This is my first course in EdApp, okay? I have never even been in EdApp until like a week ago. All right. So now we're gonna do some self-reflection on us, right? As the learners. Rate yourself on how confident you are to do the following skills and how important you feel they are to do them. So rate yourself on how confident you are. Confidence measures knowledge and skills. Okay, when you're confident to do something, that means you have the knowledge, you have the skills to do it. That produces confidence. And how important you feel they are to do them. So important speaks to attitude. How important do I feel it is to actually do this? Okay, so we're going to use this cool feature. And I have a question from Sangeeta. Do you create your own images, or would you be able to recommend where to source characters and scenes? Okay, yes, we can talk about that. These characters I made in a tool, is a video animation tool called Vyond, V-Y-O-N-D. And I use it for animated videos because I just found that it was a great way to produce stories. But I also use it to produce actual images that I, use like screenshots of and then bring it into the course. And that's what I did in this case. Okay. Oh, I keep clicking on the screen as if that's going to change anything. I need to use the iPad. Okay, so drag the words to the appropriate zone. And I believe this is also a survey question. So I could say, I make eye contact. Do I do this well? And do I think it's important? Or do I not do this well and I think it's important? Okay, so you just put it in the right quadrant that describes you. This is the not important, but I do it well. Or I don't think it's important and I don't do this well. You just drag it to the appropriate place in the matrix. Okay, so now you're thinking about, how do I perform this? Okay, and so since there isn't like an automatic feedback for however you rated yourself, because it's a survey, right? I'm going to give you a chance here to like reflect on how you rated yourself, and then and so I didn't put myself as, I'm great at everything, so I still have room to grow. Now that you have identified these areas of growth, you can start improving on them. First impressions are lasting, so give the employee your full attention when they come to you with a question or concern. Stop working. Here's the 3 things, right? The 3 things that are on our action list. Stop working, make eye contact, and open your body. I'm like Stella. Oh, then you can start doing these 3 things. Okay, so from here, the story could continue and would continue, covering all the steps that Stella should take to handle Justin's concern. And then in lesson 2, I have kind of how the story design model works, and how I used it to create this story-based micro-learning lesson. So any reactions to what you've just seen in this lesson, Justin Speaks Up? Any reactions, any kind of insights that you got while I was demonstrating it? Any questions?
Okay, well, I have some questions, Rance.
Good.
And maybe we can start our conversation here. And if anyone has any questions, they can just add it to the chat and we could get to those. Does that sound good?
Sounds good.
Okay, so I have a couple of questions. So relatable characters, and we went into it a little bit. How important is it, and how do you go about finding out who these characters would be? Now, the reason why I ask that is because sometimes, well, most of the time, it's a management coming to the ID and saying, here's the problem with what's going on in the office or in the workspace. And then if we dug a little further and asked someone in the workspace, they might have a different idea of what the problem is and where it lies. How deep do you go in that investigation? How do you go in that go about that investigation? And do you, let's say there's a gap there, do you inform management, hey, your workers say it's this? How do you approach that kind of situation?
Okay, so I hear 2 questions. One is more related to like the action list, like what belongs on the action list and what doesn't. What are the real problems out there? And then the other is maybe like getting to know who that audience is so that you can create the right relatable characters. Those are great questions. So performance consulting needs to be kind of like in our wheelhouse as instructional designers. We need to know how to ask questions that unearth these kinds of important things for training, right? And so if you have a training manager that's coming to you and saying, these are the learning objectives, create it from here, and they are, and they are open to it, then you should keep asking those questions until if you see like a complete action list here, it's like, okay, I don't see any problem here. But if there are some gaps, you're like, what do they mean by this? Then I would say, in your experience, then, is the instructional designer given access to a subject matter expert that they can go and ask further questions to?
I mean, usually we do, right? We talk to subject matter experts. I'm wondering how important is the firsthand knowledge of the problem, or I guess that's also part of my question. How important is that investigation? Is it necessary, or do we go on our prior experience with dealing with organizations?
Right. I think it really depends on. I don't think that we as instructional designers are always going to have that firsthand experience with the problem that's out there. We're going to have to rely on our subject matter experts, and we're going to have to rely on our stakeholders to give us some business outcomes. Like, what do you want to actually happen as a result of this? And then use our logic, our gifts in analysis and logic to be able to identify the actions that will achieve that business outcome. So without alignment to the business outcome, that's where we're going to find gaps, I think. If we know what the training is trying to achieve in the business, and if we know what root problem it's trying to solve for, then we can align that with the actions on our action list to see if that's actually going to take place. And if it's not, get to that subject matter expert and make sure that they are giving us some solid steps that are going to make that, and we can actually help them through that. Subject matter experts do not know what they know. They have a curse of knowledge, just like we all do. Whenever you know a lot about something, you have this curse of knowledge. It's difficult for you to imagine. It's impossible, really, to imagine not knowing it. So there are a lot of assumptions that we make when we know a lot about something, that we need somebody else to help us see our blind spots. So we help subject matter experts see the blind spots. They already have in their head how a process takes place, right? But we, as the instructional designer, need to come in and help just lay it out. You know nothing about it. That's actually a good thing, because you are helping them figure it out. I cannot tell you how many times I have had meetings with subject matter experts and the lights have come on and they're like, oh, that's our process. And you find gaps in the process, especially if you go with the story writing route, because now you're really making it concrete by making it a story. And they are able to see it with fresh eyes. Like, that's not how our process works, or that's not how people are supposed to be doing things. Well, that's what it says here on this action list. That's what it says in your procedures. Well, that's not right. And it opens their eyes. It's really a wonderful thing. Story can really open their eyes to their own way of doing things and help them spot their own gaps. I think the same is true with creating relatable characters. That if you can create that character along with the subject matter expert, even better, because I mean, they know who is going to be receiving this training. Just ask them those questions. What are they fearing the most right now? What are their external pressures right now? And sometimes it opens their eyes to like, I wonder if there's a different solution for this than training. Maybe we just need to put the printer closer to people. Just sometimes it's something crazy, simple that fixes the problem. So
awesome.
Yeah, I hope that answers your question.
It does. We have a short question and a long question here. One is how to avoid sounding too paternalistic, from Shuan. And then we have a longer question. I think the longer question might actually be pretty good for micro-learning. I'm gonna read this out aloud right here. This is Marlena's, and then we can get back to the short one. Loved how you focus on just 3 takeaways, all shown through imagery. That was a really solid way to help with retention. Question: when storytelling and using micro-learning, would you recommend all lessons being such small chunks? And I think what we struggle with in storytelling and micro-learning is that our lessons end up being too long and or too short, but with too much material, and so retention isn't awesome. Do you have a golden rule for a lesson, re how much info and how much story? That's a really good question.
Beautiful question.
Yeah.
And micro-learning is such a beautiful thing. And I've only recently come to really, really appreciate it. And actually, it really solidified when I started making this course in EdApp. I'll be honest. Thank you, EdApp, for that opportunity to really do this. Because what it does is it makes you rethink how you are presenting content, because you want to say it in as few words as possible, using imagery, like you pointed out, really helps to cut out a lot of words. So I would have had to use a lot of words to describe what Stella was doing. She was sitting at her computer. She didn't pay him any attention. She kept working. Her eyes were focused on the screen. I don't need all of those words. All I need is just to show it. I need to show her what she is doing. And this is why it's so important. I'm going to go back to the action list just for a split second here. That's why it's important for those actions to be observable actions. They have to be observable actions. It's not enough to just have a course about knowledge. We have to have a course that trains people to do things, observable things. And that's why it's important for storytelling, is because you cannot put characters into conflict with things that they're thinking in their head. They have to be observable actions. And that's what we did with Stella, right? You saw her doing things. So microlearning is this wonderful way of teaching efficiently and making sure that there is nothing extraneous in it. Just teach how to do that observable action. So I can't say that I have done this enough, microlearning enough to have a golden rule. I will say that Carl Kopp's book, Carl Kopp and Robin DeFelice, have written a book called Microlearning Short and Sweet. And it's a really just no nonsense kind of microlearning book that I highly recommend.
Awesome.
But I would say that, yeah, if you're struggling with that length, take a look at your content. What can I take out? What can I eliminate? What is not about the action here? What do people actually have to do when they leave this? And of course, what knowledge is actually mandatory to be in this course? So that's the answer to Marlena's question, I think.
Now, I'm going to reframe the other question, Shuan's question here. How to avoid sounding too paternalistic. So I think story is super important in terms of this. So I'm going to ask you this. Instead of saying paternalistic, maternalistic, I don't want to go to that dichotomy. But what I do want to address is, how do you avoid sounding like you're talking down to somebody in a lesson and saying, this is what you need to do? I see stories, we have empathy in stories, and maybe you can speak a little bit more about that and how stories really go down to the level of where we all are when we take those lessons.
Yeah. And that's a very valid question, Shuan. I would say that speaking down and disrespecting a learner would be to display a list of behaviors on a screen and say, do these things. Storytelling actually brings respect into the picture. It respects the learner's prior knowledge. It respects their language. Stories are the language of humans. And you're able then to allow them to come up with the solutions themselves, because you've just presented a story. Here's a story. What do you think? It allows them that respect, that distance. And this is kind of an advantage, Sam, to the third person, is that it gives them that safe distance from the story, that they're able to observe it and make observations that they will apply to themselves, but it doesn't come across as finger pointing. Mm-hmm. So I think that answers Shuan's question.
That's awesome. That's a great answer. So here we have another question. Well, first, how do you spell the drawing program? That's an easy one, right? How do you spell that?
Yeah, I'll just put it in the chat.
Great. And the next question is, should you train on the key point first and then add the story, or is the story alone the training, or both train key points that reinforce the story? So this is a question of format in terms of what's the most effective. Yeah.
So, Anjanetta, I would say most people, when they're taking a course, they know from the onset why they're taking it. They know what it's about. I tend to say story first, followed by training, kind of following the format of the example that I showed, simply because it's that unexpected, element of, oh, I'm in the deep end of the pool. Some of you may use scenario-based training. So you're in the deep end of the pool and you're learning as you go. You're making observations as you go, and you're making decisions along the way, maybe on behalf of a character even, as you go. So storytelling opens up options for training that you would never have without the story, without starting with that story. So I would recommend story first.
Awesome. I think we're going to have to wrap up. Are there any last questions here for Rance? I'll ask the last question. How about yesterday, and I think it would be worth repeating, is just how does gamification and story design work? If you could just give us a kind of a brief summary of that, because we do discuss it in the book, and it was very interesting.
Yeah. So I know there's a gamification element to EdApp, which I have not fully explored. I'm excited to do that. So gamification, serious games, gamified learning, it's another approach to solve for things that storytelling also solves for. It is a way of, yes, engagement, but when you marry the two and you have a storyfied, gamified learning experience, wow, it just amps up the gaming aspect of it. A lot of games don't have stories associated with them, but those that do are completely immersive, and people get completely hooked on them.
Absolutely.
So I would say that they are good partners. Gamification has certain Karl Kopp calls it the evil trifecta, the badges, the dashboards, and something else. I forget what they are. They can be evil if they're just kind of pasted on, right? But if they're an integral part of the learning experience, then it can be something really, really valuable. And I think the same is true for story. You could just slap a non-related story onto a course, but it has to be integrated into the course, and story design is the methodology that helps you do that. So yeah, definitely a nice partnership with games
Great.
and stories.
Now we're gonna have to hand it back to Luke. I do know that in your course you do have a story design lesson that anyone can access, and I think it might have the things that were in the slides before. So anyone can access that, and that'll be available in the content library. And this will also be on YouTube. So if you missed anything, you can just go into YouTube later today or tomorrow, and it will be there. Thank you so much, Rance, for coming and being here with us. We truly appreciate it. It's really, really great.
And Sam, just before Luke takes it, I did put in the chat a link to the website. If you go to the blog tab, you will find one there. I think it's called Why Instructional Designers Are the Best Storytellers, and it'll kind of walk you through the story design process. There's a lot of blog posts there that talk about the story design process if you want to examine that a little more. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Thank you, Rance.
That was fantastic. Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Rance. That was very, very insightful. So you can see everyone that's on the line right now, you can see a few links on screen. If you wanted to get in touch with Rance, feel free to head to his website and you can reach out there. And if any of you are new to EdApp and wanted to hear a little bit more about the features of the platform and discuss an implementation, feel free to shoot me a note at luke@edapp.com if you're in the USA, or Jamie will look after you in the UK as well. As Sam mentioned, the courseware that we had a look at today will be in our content library that is free to access, and that'll be in there later this week. So thanks again, Rance. That was fantastic, and hopefully we can get you back on in the near future.
Thank you, Luke. Thank you, Sam. It was wonderful to be with you today.
Awesome. All right.
Have a nice day, guys.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.